Even if the United States wanted to impose a new Cold War on China, I don't think it will succeed. So far, very few countries are willing to join it. China is the world's largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity. China is the world's largest consumer market. It's also the largest trading partner for over 130 countries. And China also has the world's largest middle class, 400 million people, middle class, larger than US population, real middle class with decent job and decent income and properties. China is also in the fourth frontier of the new industrial revolution. And China is also the first major economy to have fully recovered from the pandemic. We have just witnessed 630 million tourists within China during this Chinese National Day 1 week holidays. The country now becomes the largest base for global fight against the pandemic and for global economic recovery. My sense is that if the United States wants to contain a country like this, the United States may itself be isolated. I remember Joe Biden mentioned the 4 daunting challenges facing the US today in his campaign speech: the unprecedented pandemic, economic recession, climate change, and the racial divide. In fact, to handle these challenges, except the racial divide, which we cannot do much about, the United States may need China's help, not the other way around. So rather than launching a Cold War against China, the US has every reason to seek China's cooperation. China champions a shared future for mankind, which the United States rejects regrettably. In retrospect, if the United States could have accepted, say, part of it, or say 20 or 30% of this great idea put forward by Chinese leader Xi Jinping, the US could have perhaps done much better in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, drastically reduced its death toll if they had chosen to work with WHO, with other international organizations, and with China. In conclusion, let us work together and reject categorically the notion of the Cold War, which was based on the so-called mutually assured destruction, or MAD. Let's embrace a new notion I call mutually assured prosperity, or MAP, or perhaps still better, the notion of globally assured prosperity, GAP. If the United States, China, and other major powers and the whole international community can work together for the common interests of mankind, for peace and for development, I hope today's dialogue will be a modest contribution to this idea of MAP or MAP or GAP, not only for China, for the US, but also for the whole mankind. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhang, for your wonderful talk, which I concur with. I like your idea. When Donald Trump leaves the White House, I'd be happy to have him in a trade class. And if he'd make a deal, he can leave as soon as he wants, but we should have him leave absolutely no later than January 20th, 2021, on the inauguration of, I'm counting on it, President Biden, because we need a new start in the United States. And if Trump, he may be on trial by then for tax evasion, but anyway, I'd be happy to have him in a trade course. And he much needs some basic training. I think the one point that I would immediately make on your remarks is that we can't really talk about China says this and the US says this and the US needs this and so on, because the US is very divided itself. And my view is that Trump is the worst president in American history and the most dangerous president that we've had in American history. He certainly doesn't represent most Americans on anything. And the issue really on the tensions and the trade and so forth is that a lot of it is in the hands of very few people. Almost everything, I would say everything that Trump has done on trade or trade war with China or other actions on China have been by executive decree. or emergency powers under US law, not even by legislation. So they hardly have been debated publicly, understood publicly, or do they reflect in any broad and deep way any views of United States citizens on this. There probably aren't deep views among most of the citizenry because unfortunately issues like these are complex. They require historical knowledge. They require a lot of discussion and dialogue. It helps, of course, when we have personal relations and experience. Even though we live in a connected age, we don't have the personal contacts as much as we need for an interconnected world to have the depth of understanding, personal relations, sense of each other's perspectives and history, and therefore views are easily manipulated on all sides, and they're subject to crazy ideas, propaganda, cultural memes, and in the US context to a absolutely terrible president in the last 4 years who's really a xenophobic, racist, and idiot, in my view. Sorry to use the language, but he's just not knowledgeable about almost anything. And because of that, we have really a dangerous situation. I think, and I hope, but nobody can be sure, that it will be less dangerous after the election on November 3rd, if the votes are counted properly, and if we don't have some disorder in the United States. I'm counting on us having a new president and a chance for a fresh start on these issues.
When we look at this whole history of big powers, during the Cold War, the old Cold War, China and the United States were somehow sharing this geopolitical purpose to check the Soviet expansionism. And then when this element was out, we came with this idea of economic exchanges, booming trade. So economic relations became the really foundation of our bilateral relations. It seems there is always a need, something substantial in bilateral relations between the two major powers. So the next foundation could be, sustainable development, renewable energies, green technologies, if Mr. Biden comes to power. If Donald Trump is still in power, I don't know, perhaps things will get worse before they get better. So that's my brief comment on your wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Some of the people in the chat think that I'm exaggerating about Trump because the US is just evil to the core. I disagree with that. I have not been a lover of US foreign policy in general for a long time. People could look at my book in 2019 called A New Foreign Policy Beyond American Exceptionalism. It was not about Trump, it was about American foreign policy. But there